Following reporting on poor conditions like food shortages, broken plumbing, and even mental health crises aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Middle East, blowback today from U.S. Central Command. Top military brass says those reports are false. But Democrats say they want answers. In fact, this is the letter sent to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth from Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal. He lists concerns over extended deployments, and he's not the only one. This is after a sailor who went overboard and had to be rescued earlier this month. Parents of soldiers say they're also worried about mental health.
They should not be deployed this long. These are old ships. They take a lot of maintenance, a lot of work. It's around the clock. You're doing something, and you're in a war zone.
Marine Corps veteran and Military Times editor-in-chief J.D. Simkins joins us now. J.D., you actually spoke to some of the families of sailors on the ship. What are their personal stories?
I mean, the personal stories that we're hearing is it's consistent with what a lot is being reported right now when it comes to just sheer exhaustion and exasperation at the length of the deployment. And I know a lot of people are pointing out the deployment length and comparing it to previous actions or previous conflicts, but the volume that we're really trying to harp on right here is the 200 plus days without a single port call. I think that is that's an exorbitant number to get to without sailors being able to step off ship and get on dry land and mentally refresh before getting back on and getting back after it. That's a very abnormal number, and that's where you're seeing some of these concerns arise among family members and among sailors themselves.
You know, the American public sees video like this, you see the facilities, you see the exterior, but you've seen the interior, what it's like to live in those conditions for that extended amount of days. What is it like? Bring it to life. How are they sleeping? Where do they go? What are the facilities like, even if they are up and running, but some critics say they're not?
I mean, under the best circumstances, facilities are up and running. You know, it's still very cramped quarters. You're seeing the same people every single day. If you're doing flight operations, you're dealing with situations that unless you're working on the flight deck, you might not be even getting outside or to be able to see the sun that day or for days on end for that matter. The sleeping situations are obviously very cramped. Beds are stacked almost like bookshelves where you don't have a lot of headspace. The showers are cramped. Everything's cramped. The food isn't great to begin with. So when you're stretching those resources thin over that long of a period, and then you're adding in the frenetic pace of combat operations and just the 24 hours on of just going flight operations on and off, some of the sleep schedules are going to be disrupted. The watch standers are having to do extra work beyond their normal daily job. So there's a lot of disruption, even if the situation was at its best. But when you're stretching those resources thin, it gets pretty precarious in a hurry.
So someone from U.S. CENTCOM they say the reports are false. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, I'm going to listen to the sailors and their families and what's coming from inside the ship. I think that's always what we're going to do. And that's, whether it's service members on land, dealing with incoming fire over the previous months with the conflict in Iran or something that's going on ship. You're going to always want to hear from sailors and Marines and soldiers themselves, because obviously information is going to get diluted once it gets up to top echelon of information dissemination. So it is important to allow sailors a voice in what we do, and I think that's what we're trying to do here.
You know, oftentimes we refer to our soldiers, our sailors, our servants in the U.S. military as America's finest. And I believe they are. I come from a family that has a long tradition of military service. Can they be at their finest under these conditions? And if you were to sit down with Pete Hegseth, what would your ask be on their behalf?
I think the ask would be, and coming from the perspective of families, the ask would be for better planning. This is something that, if you knew you were going into a conflict, why weren't the rotations better set up to accommodate the needs of sailors, to get them in and out of theater in a manner that allows them to some sense of normality or coming back to that? And I would like to remind you, this is also talking about a carrier. There are, for all the problems that might be going on a carrier, There are also destroyers in this group out there that only have 300 to 400 people on board, much closer and much more cramped quarters than what the Lincoln has, fewer mental health resources than what the Lincoln has. So you're talking about other ships in this group as well that might be dealing with situations that are even worse than what we're hearing from the Lincoln. So I think those things should always be taken into account, and just take the concerns of family members themselves into account.
In your words, I will always listen to the sailors. J.D. Simkins, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here today.